There are lathes with chucks that are stuck, and then there are lathes with chucks that are really stuck. So I've been at this a couple days. I have soaked the front and back with some penetrating oil. I don't know how great this stuff is, but it's what I've been using. And what I've done now, my setup is I've already snapped off one bolt. It exploded as I had this set up. So now I changed over to a half-inch bar that 3/8 inch bar that I caught between two of the bolts. I have a piece of wood there, just pine 2x4 piece. Actually, it's part of the explosion that is protecting my ways, and I've actually drilled the spindle there. I tried the aluminum with a hole and a clamp bolt, and that didn't work. So what I've done is actually gone through the spindle to capture, what is that, an AN6 bolt, aircraft bolt, that keeps it from turning. You can see the rings there where I had it clamped, and it just spun. In order to lift it up here, I'm using an engine lift on the end to keep pressure. And as you can tell, my homemade foot is just barely off the ground. So I've got the engine lift picking up this corner of the lathe. If you can tell there, the bolt has started bending just slightly. I don't know if that'll come through in the pictures or not. And it's just suspended here. I don't think I was getting enough penetration. So what I've gone and done is through the top, I've drilled 3 holes. Let's see, spin it this way. There we go. I've drilled 3 holes. When you drill through the cast iron, you get a powder out. And just as soon as you hit the steel of the threads, you'll start getting the little pigtails, little curly cues coming out, and that's when you know to stop. And then I have filled those holes with the penetrating oil in an attempt to get it back where it needs to be. And still, this thing is not moving. My final attempt here is to leave it overnight and just let it sit to see if as that penetrating oil penetrates and removes that old oily crud, if it will loosen up. Let's see, just give it another squirt. And fill those holes up and just let it sit. All right, let's see what that does. And here we go. It's a warm, sunny day here in North Carolina, and I am a happy camper. I have finally gotten this chuck to let loose, and it's come loose, but I'm going to demonstrate here the setup that I had to make it happen. Let's see, it's going to be hard to do this with one hand, but recap, my original setup is I have the engine lift picking up on a bar that, let's see, we can go in through this side here, and you can see just how much. Well, maybe you can't see that, but that bolt is really twisted up. So I had the holes here that I was injecting some penetrating oil into, and it really wasn't moving. I had a bolt here using a single bolt against the 2x4, and it pretty much exploded. I think this may have been a grade A bolt, and when it let loose, boy, the parts just flew. That was scary. Alright, so I switched up to where I have pressure being applied on the radius with 2 bolts and jacking the lathe up so that it was actually up off the floor and it still wouldn't let go. So what I did was I applied the magic propane, and I brought it in and I heated the area right here. I probably heated it for about 3 to 5 minutes. I got it to the point to where the penetrating oil was boiling out of these 2 holes, and it still wasn't moving. So the final trick, I had to apply a Leroy. And a Leroy came down on the end of this bar, and it still wouldn't move. So I hit it again, and I got the hint that it might be wanting to move, so I slapped it one good smart time, and it moved maybe 1/8 of a turn. And from there, I just popped it several more times, and it came right off. Once I got it loosened up, I used the pry bar to finish screwing it off and used it as a wrench to screw it all the way off. I've cleaned it up a little bit. It's actually still warm from the heating, but as you can see, once you get it loose, get it off of that register, I do have, let's see if it'll focus, I do have a few dimples there in the spindle, but I don't think it's going to do much to have any effect on that accuracy. I'll get a dial indicator on here and see what concentricity I have after I get that bolt out of there, which I'm wondering how I'm going to do. Alright, so this is the stuck chuck with a little luck redux. This is the bolt that was going through the spindle here, and you can see how that hole got deformed. Come on now, focus for me. Alright, so I was able to get that out with not much trouble at all. This was my fixture. It was a cutoff from another project that went wrong. So I took the bandsaw, drilled a slot, and then a little few places there for it to compress. That was a fairly tight fit, and then when the bolt went through it there, clamped it together, it tried to hold, and it held well enough to mar the spindle extension there. Oh, there's the hole there. You can focus now. It was enough to mar the spindle extension, but was not enough to hold it to keep it from turning. But now that I have it off, I've got my dial indicator set. Let's see if I can get it to focus in without the glare. There we go. There we go. Without the glare, and listen to this baby crank up. So I got the back gear in, running at slowest speed. I've got a few bumps that is sliding into there, but for the most part it's holding directly there on that 18 mark. I don't think I've damaged the spindle much at all. So looking in the chuck itself at our threads here, it's been a few minutes and it's just now getting cool enough to where I can hold on to it. We see that the threads had a little bit coming off there, but for the most part it's held together. All right, well, that gives me a back plate that I can work with, and I can buy me a chuck. Now, the chuck that I got with this lathe was a 12-inch 4-jaw Skinner. I don't know if it's any good or not, but the bolts that the guy gave me with it wouldn't even go in here, so I don't think it actually came off of this lathe. When I flip it up and look at the back, it looks like this chuck hasn't been on anything in a really long time. So I don't know if I'm going to try to restore this chuck or just buy a new one and use this as a backing plate.